Hello my bookish friends, welcome back. I am Elizabeth. This is Reading Riley and today we're going to talk about all of the books that I read in March. I had such a good reading month in March. After February, I was so discouraged that I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to mood read for all of March, and thankfully that worked so much better for me because I was picking up things that I really thought I was going to like, and hey, what do you know, I enjoyed them. Mood read March. There's an idea in there somewhere. Nothing this month is below a 3.5 star, so I recommend every single one of these. I read 9 books in the month of March, and I'm going to tell you all about them, starting with my lowest ranked to my highest ranked. I recommend them all. Very excited to tell you about them. Let me know down in the comments below what your favorite book was that you read this month. Always looking to know these things. I will divide this up into chapters down below to make it easier to navigate. I'm also going to put my other social media right up here. If you want to come follow me somewhere else, then do it. Let's just, let's get into it. All right, starting with the 3.5 stars, which I think I have 3 of these, and everything after that is either a 4 or a 4.5 or a 5 star. So it was a good month. My first 3.5 star book this month is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. It's more of a mystery novel, I guess, so it's a little bit cozier than what I typically read. It was very quirky and uniquely written. We follow Ernest, who writes books about how to write books, specifically mysteries. So he's got this list, Ronald Knox's 10 Commandments of Detective Fiction. Ronald Knox was a real life person who was around in Agatha Christie's day. He was part of like a book club with her, and he had this list of 10 commandments. He goes over this list at the beginning of the book, and I looked it up. It's a real thing. A couple of them are a little outdated, of course. And so he kind of uses this framework to tell you the story of his family. He has this like mobster family, and they're getting together for a family reunion. His brother just got out of jail, and everyone hates him because he's the one that put his brother in jail. He says, everyone in my family has killed someone. And as he tells us the story, he's breaking that fourth wall. He's talking to you as the reader. And even as I listened to the audiobook, he even knew that I was listening to the audiobook. Like, they clearly made specific changes that referenced, like in the physical book, it probably said, even as you're reading this book, because in my audiobook it said, I know you're listening to the audiobook, and I was like, what? So it's very self-referential in that sense. And this main character, Ernest, just very quirky, he's funny. And then along the way, Ernest also comes up with his own list of do's and don'ts, which he tells you as he shows you while he's telling you his story. I will say the middle part it dragged on a little bit. I started to lose interest when we started going from character to character to character because he's telling us about everyone in his family and everything that they've done. So you'd start to get connected to one character and then we move on to a different character. So there were certain parts in the middle area where I was kind of like, in fact, I was considering DNFing this. I did not think I was going to like this as much as I did, but it's one of those where I hung in for it and I stayed till the end, and I thought it was definitely worth it. It came all around full circle. It was twistier than I was expecting it to be, and it did some things that I did not see coming, which was cool. I gave this 3.5 stars because I felt like even though I considered DNFing this, there was just something so unique. It was a solid mystery. So I think if you are a mystery reader, you will particularly like this one. It's not going to be overly dark. It has this like kind of, like I said, quirky, like comical way of telling this story that involves actually a lot of death and a lot of murder, but it is very lighthearted in the way that it's told. Next, I have Blind Spots by Thomas Mullen. This one is an arc. I think it just came out. In this novel, 7 years ago, everybody in the world went blind within a period of months. Nobody knows why, nobody knows what's going on. Over the course of these 7 years, they invented technology to keep up with the world and what's going on. And so they have these things called vitters, and they connect right into your spine or your brain, and it uploads the images into your head. So it's like sight, but you're not actually seeing with your eyes. Like, you're not using your eyes to see, you're using your brain to interpret the cameras in front of you. This was some of the best world building actually that I've seen outside of a fantasy book in a really, really long time. It had that dystopian quality, but he really, really took the time to think about everything in this world and how that would be affected. Things like the technology that's being invented to make up for those things. Drugs that people may take to help them grieve the loss of their sight and their vision that might make them see like hallucinations or something in their mind. How once these vitters are invented, there really is no difference between daylight and nighttime because the cameras can see in either one. Also, like, there are some that can see through walls that are given just to the police for specific investigations if they need to. And then also they noticed that it was weird because we would still blink, but there would be no blockage in your vision when you blink. So they had to adjust it, like an update, in order to put just like one little slit of blackness to mimic blinking. And also, like, when they slept, they would have to change it so that when you closed your eyes, you would actually see nothing as well, because it would be weird to try to sleep when you can still see what's going on, even though your eyes are closed. It's a lot. It's a lot. In current day, there is a murder of a scientist, and there's only one witness, and she says that the killer was blacked out in her vision. None of the police believe this, because people all the time use the excuse when they don't want to like rat someone out or they don't want to tell the police something. They'll say, oh, my vitter must have malfunctioned. It's a common excuse. And so no one believes anyone when they say someone was blacked out. So someone is hacking these vitters and essentially changing their entire perception of what they think is around them. There are also these like counterculture groups where they think that they are being controlled by the government because through these vitters, and so they choose to live in blindness and they feel like that's following the righteous path. And so there's almost like this like cult of people that just choose blindness. I really did get the sense that we had this like macro world that we were looking at. I would have liked a little bit more on the micro level, a little bit more of the implications of this dystopia on a very personal level, which we do get, but it's not like this personal feeling like I wanted it to feel. It feels more like this kind of spy novel as you get into like almost this like conspiracy of governmental, you know, regulation and all kinds of stuff like that. It felt like this Jack Ryan or like secret agent kind of energy to it. And I would have liked to maybe follow some of the different characters that had more of like a human experience. But the crime aspect of the novel was really well written. There were some twists in there along the way. I think this book would be best for somebody who does enjoy those books about like the political intrigue, kind of almost like political conspiracy thrillers, but also someone that has an interest in maybe some kind of like sci-fi aspect, Black Mirror type aspect as well. My next 3.5 star book is Such Pretty Flowers by K.L. Cerra, and I read this one with Sav over at Riveting Reads for her book club, Lights Out Book Club. We had a really interesting discussion about this. I was kind of vacillating between 3.5 and 4 stars on this one. It has the atmosphere. This is all vibes, basically. It really hits that Southern Gothic for me, just like the nail right on the head. We're talking about carnivorous plants, potential dark arts or like tinctures made from those plants. There are mysterious deaths. There's a good amount of body horror in here. And then we have this like magnetic villain. The last message that Holly received from her brother Dane before he was found cleaved open after having killed himself was a text message saying, "Get it out of me." He believed there was something inside him. Holly thinks there's no way. And she did know that he was suffering with some mental health issues, but she still, like, something's fishy about this. And so she starts to look into what happened to her brother Dane, not just for herself, but for her parents. Set in Savannah, Georgia. She's not a detective or anything. She's just a sister. She actually works in a library, which, dream job. Starts trying to get close to Dane's then girlfriend, Maura. And as she does, she realizes these things about Maura that she didn't know. Like, Maura's actually really well off. Maura lives in this condo that is freaking gorgeous, covered with plants. And so she actually starts to get pulled into Maura. She gets this like feeling of attraction toward her, almost like she's a siren, and she's just kind of like drawing her in. And she thinks that whatever is starting to happen to her must have happened to her brother, but she has to figure that out and figure out what's going on before she ends up with the same fate. The reason that I ended up giving this 3.5 stars instead of 4, after talking this through in the live show with Sav, I've realized how many plot holes there are in here. There are definitely some things that don't quite show up. Like if you don't really pay that close attention to it, this is just fun. It's just a fun read. But if you really start to examine the little bits here and there, you will definitely find some plot holes, some things that don't make too much sense. But the vibes of this were so freaking good that I'm almost willing to like overlook that because I just had a fun time with it. I loved being in that space. I loved the body horror in here. That kind of reminded me of Mexican Gothic a little bit. And I've heard, I think Sav said Wilder Girls, which I have not read. There's also this bit about the language of flowers and how in like Victorian times, people would have to maintain this sense of propriety. And so in order to have these real discussions that they wanted to have, they would communicate through bouquets of flowers, and every flower has a meaning to it, and it's just so interesting to me. Like it really made me want to learn how to read flowers, how to speak flowers. This cover pretty much says it all. Like if you want to feel that energy, then read this book. Next, I finally started the Will Trent series by Karin. The first book is Triptych. So I'm just now trying to like get into this world because I finished Grant County series last year and I miss Sarah Linton. I really miss her, but I know she does come back in this series, so I'm looking forward to that. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this. I listened to the audiobook. The narrator is a man and most of the characters we follow are men. There's like one female character, Angie. So when I first picked it up, I was like, am I gonna like this? It has very little affect to his voice. So I felt like, but I did start to get invested and intrigued. I thought this was gonna follow Will Trent a lot more than it actually does. The book is kind of divided into two separate stories that are being told alongside each other, and then you kind of have to figure out how they fit in together. It actually reminded me of, all right, I don't know where it is, but it reminded me of Pieces of Her by Karin Slaughter, because she did the same thing in that story, where they have these two kind of stories that are seemingly unrelated, and then you have to figure out how they're related. So in the first story, we are following Michael Ormwood. He's a seasoned detective, and he's investigating this case where this woman, in this case it was a sex worker, was killed, and she had her tongue bitten off. Michael's got it tough too, because he's very distant from his wife. They are not close to each other like they used to be. He has a son who is mentally disabled and very much like will never be able to be by himself, will always need care. He's just trying to keep it together. In walks Will Trent from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI. He has found some other women who match the MO for this woman who's been killed. And so together they are going to try to figure out who the killer is. Also in that timeline, we have Angie, who grew up with Will. Well, she works in Vice undercover. And on the second timeline, we're following this guy, John Wells, who is 35 years old, just getting released from prison. He went into prison when he was 17 and charged as an adult for sexually assaulting and killing a minor. He gets out of prison and he goes to the pawn shop to pawn something, and somebody tells him, I don't know why you're coming here, you have great credit. And he realizes that while he's been in prison, someone's been using his name and taken out credit cards in his name, bought a house in his name, and has been paying all of the bills. And he's like, what's going on? Who would do this? Like, it doesn't make sense. If you're gonna steal someone's identity, why would you steal someone who has been in prison for a felony, who is on the list of sex offenders? Like, why would you pick that person to steal their identity? So he doesn't really know what's going on with that. Will Trent himself kind of gives me Monk energy. Like, he's not as weird as Monk, although I would definitely consider him neurodiverse. He is dyslexic and he really gets down on himself for that. He's very hard on himself about that. So he listens to a lot of audiobooks, a lot of audiobook rep in here. He loved that. And instead of taking notes, he always records himself with a recorder. He's said to be very tall and lanky and good looking, but he's just kind of weird. The other cops, they don't really like him. But he's very straightforward in a way as well. Also, there's definitely some outdated language in here, so if you're triggered by that, especially like the R word, be ready for that if you're gonna read this one. But I thought it was really good. I really had a good time with this. I ended up being very invested in Will Trent and his life in general and him as a character and as a person. So, I mean, I was never not going to continue with this series because it's Karin Slaughter, but I'm excited. I'm excited to get to the point where Sarah Linton comes back into the picture because I think them together are going to be interesting. Next, we have one that I actually just finished today and surprisingly really loved this one. I was expecting to be let down by this. I was expecting it to be just a kind of like throwaway thriller, but I'm really digging this writing style, and that is I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. We're following a film professor and podcaster, Bodie Kane. Bodie had a rough childhood. She had some family tragedy that went down when she was very young. And then she had 4 years at this boarding school where her roommate at the time was murdered. The gym teacher at the time, who was a black man, was sent to prison for that and is still currently in prison for that in present timeline. Bodie gets asked to come back to this school in order to teach a class about podcasting, which is really cool. I love the podcasting element in this, although there is no like on-page or in-ear podcasts, if you know what I mean by that. Like there's no actual like segments of the podcast, but it's very much, a lot of this is revolving around podcasts because that's what she's teaching. And the kids in her class are making their own podcasts, and one of them decides to talk about Thalia, who was Bodie's roommate who was killed in 1995. So a lot of talk about like 1995 stuff too, a lot of Nirvana discussions and things about like the music scene and culture of the time that I really liked. I immediately clicked with this main character, with Bodie Kane. I just clicked with her for some reason. I really felt like, even though this writing is not flowery at all, it's very, there's like a tenderness to this writing. It's oddly self-aware. And this book in general is not overtly feminist, but it definitely lingers on certain plot points that would make you sit and think about more progressive ideas. Especially the fact that this man, Owens, I think was his name, was a black man who went to prison for this murder. And the kids who are doing the podcast don't think that he was guilty. They think someone else was guilty, and that he's just still sitting in jail this whole time. They also touch on things like cancel culture, things like pronouns. And so it feels very modern, it feels very today, and it feels like it's talking about these things in a way that is healthy without like shoving it down your throat. Oh, there's also a lot of theater in there because the night that Thalia was killed, it was right after their school production of Camelot. I love the theater aspect as well. I'm an ex-theater kid, so I loved that. Oh, and she's talking in second person. Okay, so she's telling this story in second person throughout the entire book, but it's weird because you forget that it's in second person because she's not talking to you as the reader. She's talking to one of her teachers from when she went to school. I think it was called Grady at the boarding school. And the whole time you're like, why is she talking to him specifically? But she'll be going off in her story and she'll just say, well, I did this and da-da-da-da-da, like she's just talking. And so you forget that she's talking to a specific person, and then she'll bring it back around again and relate it to this teacher. So just very interestingly told. And this whole time you're like, why is she talking to this teacher? And like, how is he involved in this situation at all? Oh, another reason I related to this main character, Bodie, here's a quote of hers talking about her meds that she's on. The dosage of my antidepressant is such that I haven't cried actual tears in a decade. But there are times when I want so badly to cry that I make all of the noises of crying, press my fists into my eyes so I feel something similar. The absence of tears hurts more, or makes whatever hurts hurt more, than if I could just stop. Totally relate to that. For a while, I didn't know if I could cry either because of my antidepressants that I'm on. But I can. So we're good there. I can cry. I just don't cry about stupid shit anymore, which is actually really nice. She keeps bringing up, so it's very referential of true crime podcasts. It's talking about that a lot. She keeps bringing up stories of actual true crime stories that are famous. And if you are a true crime junkie like I am, you will pick up on what she's talking about. She'll never say names. She'll never say exactly what it is. But she'll say the one about this, the one about that, the one about the guy who shot his girlfriend in the bathroom because he claimed that he thought she was a burglar. That one was Oscar Pistorius, who was a former professional sprinter, South African sprinter. So like, she'll say the one about that, the one with this dude that did that, the one that did that. And if you know, you know. And if you don't, you're not missing anything crucial, but it's kind of fun. It's like a little Easter egg that you find in there. You're like, oh yeah, I know which one she's talking about. Yeah, There's also a lot in here about how our emotions and time paint our memories of things and the context, which I loved. I love that discussion in general because we cannot trust our memories. And we think we can, but at the same time, Bodhi thinks maybe there was something. Maybe if I had said something differently, maybe if I hadn't pointed them in this direction. She feels all of this guilt for the fact that potentially the wrong guy is in jail and what she said to the police at the time. And did they just ask her the wrong questions, or was she focusing on the wrong things? And if she had focused on the right thing, would they have found the actual correct killer? And is he even the right killer? And so there's all of these questions about like memory and who we think we are versus how other people perceive us, and all of that, like going back to like seeing the people that she knew in high school, all of those feelings that you might get revolving around how you are perceived as a person versus how you actually felt on the inside, which is just a can of worms. A can of worms. Anyway, I thought it was really good. I don't know if I'm giving it 4 stars or 4.5 stars, but I really, really liked it. It kept my interest the entire time. Loved the main character. Oh, and it's narrated by, what's her name? She's like a super famous audio narrator. I'll put it up here. I don't remember her name right now. The audio narration is perfection. It's so good. The next book I want to talk to you about was my book club pick for the month of March, and that is The Drift by C.J. Tudor. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Really, really actually enjoyed this, but this, I gotta say, it's not a beach read. This is not one that you can just sit down and half pay attention and do something else at the same time. You have to pay attention, and I think you will get out of this what you put into it. It is so meticulously plotted, but there are so many characters. I kept a list of all of the characters as I was going, and I think that really, really helps. I would recommend doing that if you want to read this one. This is kind of in this apocalyptic future almost. This virus is being spread around, and we're following 3 different people in separate narrations. First, we're following Hannah, who is on a coach or a bus that is shipping a bunch of kids away from this like private school that she goes to. A bunch of rich kids. They are trying to get away from the school because the infection has showed up there, and so they're trying to get out of there before they catch whatever this virus is. Their coach or bus or whatever gets flipped over in this terrible snowstorm, and they end up in this drift, and they're trapped inside the coach. And then they find that at least one of the kids in there has the virus. I don't know how much I want to tell you about that, but it gets interesting. Next, we have Meg, who is an ex-police officer. She wakes up in this, what are they called? Cable car, which is not a ski drift. No, that's not the word either.
It's not a seat thing. I don't know why I thought it was one of those seat things and they were just all lined up next to each other. No.
It's like an actual car, like a full car. Meg wakes up in there. All these people start coming to consciousness and they're like, wait, where are we? Where are we going? They're on their way to the retreat. And the retreat is a place where they are trying to come up with a cure for whatever this virus is. And they find that one of the men in their company is actually dead. Meg knows this man. He was a cop. But she doesn't want to say anything because she doesn't know who killed him. Somebody stabbed him. And again, they are stuck in the middle, floating out in midair in this cable car, and they have to figure out how to escape as well. And then lastly, we're following Carter, who is at the retreat, and he, among his other cohorts, are trying to come up with, like I said, a cure for this virus. They've got a lot of equipment in there, and they've got a lot of stuff going on and experimental things, and their power is starting to go out for longer and longer periods of time, and so there's definitely a risk there for them. If you're interested in watching the replay of the discussion with Ashley from Ashley's Little Library, I will link that above and below. Well, there was a lot to say about this one, especially once you get into the spoilers, but I will say that she managed to do something in here that I have never seen done before. I've seen it done, but not on this level. I was so impressed with that. The ending was very bleak, but then also at the same time, there's this kind of last minute, like, is it all worth it? It very much makes you contemplate humanity on this like large scale when it comes to survival, how we throw our humanity out the window. It becomes a very solitary game because you have to look out for number one. There's this quote, another quote in there, the earth is full of dead good guys. So essentially it's saying, yeah, you're a good guy, but when you're in a state of survival, you're also gonna be a dead guy. So what's the point of being a good guy if you're gonna be dead anyway? So it's really exploring that. I thought it was great. I thought the twists were great. It shocked me. It was a lot of fun. I recommend it. I can certainly see why some people DNF'd this or some people are ranking it lower because there are so many characters and it takes a lot to understand what's going on. Like I said, you really have to put the effort in to understand what's going on with this. It's not just some chill, easy read. So I get it, it's not going to be for everyone, but I think CJ Tudor's writing just shines and it's so poised and thoughtful and clever and patient, and it all comes back around. It all comes together at the end. Really, I really enjoyed this one. Okay, next we have The Book of the Most Precious Substance by Sarah Gran. I really liked this one, y'all. I don't know what I was expecting going into this. First of all, this cover is freaking gorgeous and beautiful and lovely. I got this on Amazon for $5 like a few days ago, so it might still be that cheap if you want it. One of those like really beautiful, buttery, weighty paperbacks and just floppy, very floppy. Anyway, what is this book about? This is a book about a book. And about authors and about love and life. Oh, it's about so much. It's about this mysterious book called The Book of the Most Precious Substance. And this book is a book about sex magic, and it's very rare. Nobody even knows if it's actually a book or not, or if it's just like a rumor. But it's said that if you go through these sex acts, there's some kind of seance or ritual to it, and if you do that, then you get all of this power. You get all of the power in the world, and it's power that like not even money can give you. It's power beyond that. It's power, it's influence. And so only like the richest people and the people that are into the most rare books even know about this. It's very on the like hush hush. This novel is an enigma to me. I honestly cannot settle on what genre I would even qualify this as. There are certainly aspects of horror, fantasy, or at least like magical realism, erotica, thriller, mystery throughout, but also like all of those things separate and together at the same time still do not encapsulate the energy of this story. I don't know, it's so special. It's so special. Okay, first of all, the audio narrator for this, I definitely recommend. Her name's Carol Manda, but she's not going to be for everybody. She's not going to be for everybody. She gave me a Lauren Bacall, Kathleen Turner vibe. She has this sultriness, this deepness to her voice that just fits perfectly with our main character of Lily. Lily is a rare book dealer, and we're following her, and she is, I just feel for Lily on so many levels. Imagine you find the love of your life. Like, you're lucky in so many ways. You were born white. You went to a nice college, a nice school. You're on this trajectory in life where you don't have to necessarily worry about money, and you're going to do well. She's an author. She wrote a book that did well. She met Abel. Abel is her like perfect match. They have this love that is so astounding. It's a love that is easy. It is a love that only gets stronger with time. It is a love that doesn't ask or require either of them to give up any part of themselves, where they can both be creative and grow together and have amazing sex, and just like the ideal love story, right? They have this, and her life is perfection. And then Abel gets diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and she ends up essentially taking care of him, and he's at the point where he can't even speak. He is just like a shell of a human being. She's broke. She can't write anymore. She's spending all of her time taking care of him. She's lost that thing that she thought that she was so lucky to have, and then in an instant it's gone. She hears about this book, The Book of the Most Precious Substance, and she knows there are a lot of people that are willing to pay a lot of money for this book. And so she decides she's going to go find this book. It unfurls from there, but that motivates her on this, and she dabbles in a little bit of the magic herself along the way, and it's very interesting. I love the ending of this. I just love this story. I thought it was so good. In fact, I'm feeling like as I'm talking about it, I should have given this one 5 stars because it's really just sitting with me, and I really like feel this one in the depths of my soul. Like, I feel connected to this story. So much more than I did her last book that I read. I read the Possession one. Can't remember what it's called, but this one I liked so much more. The pacing toward the middle of this could have gone a little bit quicker, but overall I have very few complaints. I have so much respect for this author and for this story and its uniqueness and its frankness. There's something that's very frank about this that is so refreshing. Anyway, that's the book of the most preciosa substance. We have a couple more here. Next, I have The Butcher by Jennifer Hillier. This is, I think, my 4th or 5th Jennifer Hillier book and my favorite of all of her books that I've read so far. I don't know what was stopping me from reading this. This is one of those books where you know who the killer is. It's a serial killer book, so you think, okay, most of the time when you read serial killer books, you're picking up hints and clues along the way to try to figure out who the killer is. That's not the case in here. You pretty much know from the very beginning who the butcher is, but we're actually more interested in the why and the how of this. And there's also more drama that gets entangled within this story. This is also set in Seattle. I swear to God, since I stepped foot in Seattle like a month ago, everything I've read and seen has been set in Seattle. This is set in Seattle. Love is Blind, I've been watching, set in Seattle. What other show? I watched another show that's set in Seattle yesterday. What the hell was it? Oh, The Power. I think it was The Power. I think it was that. Anyway, there was a rash of grisly serial murders in Seattle in 1985, or at least he was taken down in 1985 by Chief Edward Shank. And then we're following Chief Edward Shank's grandson. Edward is moving into a retirement facility and he gives his home that he's lived in for years and years to his grandson. I think his name is Matt. And he is a young and upcoming chef and restaurateur. He's got these people wanting to do a reality show with his restaurant. He is like on the up and up. He's worked hard his entire life to have everything go well for him, and it's finally all going perfectly well. He also has this girlfriend. Her mother died 2 years after the butcher was caught, but she's convinced that her mother was also murdered by the butcher. But if that's the case, is the wrong guy in jail. Wow, this is just like the storytelling aspect of this is just chef's kiss. It's chef's kiss. It's just good storytelling. This does get darker than I anticipated. In fact, I would now like to place Jennifer Hillier on a shelf with the likes of Karin Slaughter and Lucinda Berry, because I feel like they all three go there. Like this one goes there, and not in like a very overly descriptive way, but the themes are disturbing, and the things that we find out are disturbing in a way that's like makes you feel icky inside and gives you that visceral reaction, which I was not expecting from this, and I love that. That's what I love about these thriller writers that just take it there. Like, who cares if someone's gonna judge you? You take it there because that's some real shit right there. That's what real people do, that it's good storytelling. Highly recommend this one if you haven't read it yet. It's a relatively quick read and it's so good and just amazing. Okay, and lastly, this one's a solid 5-star for me. Was not expecting this one whatsoever. I have been recommended this book so many times and it just felt like generic to me. No. Not this one. And that is Look Closer by David Ellis. This was so twisty. Oh my gosh, like it's like beyond Alice Feeney twisty. Like you thought the twists were done and there's more and then there's another one and then there's another one. So, wow, I can't, who are you? Who are you, David Ellis? And where did you come from? Because this is a high tier ranking thriller. If you are into thrillers, domestic or otherwise, I think you will enjoy this one. You will definitely be surprised at least a couple of times in here because this blew my socks off. We're following Simon and Vicky, who seem like this really normal couple. Simon's a professor at this college and he's a law professor and he's trying to get tenured, but there's of course all kinds of politics going on, and one of the other people who are up for the spot happens to have a very rich family who has been donating money to the school for years and years. And so he's like, oh shit. He seems like one of those guys where he's like really chill. He doesn't dress like a professor. He kind of dresses like one of the students. He's like a more alternative professor, like the kind of professor that you would want to hang out with that seems cool, but also maybe has like a bit of a Peter Pan complex. And then Vicky is a social worker and an advocate for domestic violence victims. So together they have this kind of odd relationship, but at the same time, Simon has some weird thing about this one of his exes, and from his point of view he is talking specifically to another woman, so it's in second person. It's very Joe Goldberg energy, and then in Vicky's perspective it's in first person, and so we're just following her in like a normal first person narrative. So the juxtaposition of that is very interesting. We're also playing with timelines, we're playing with points of view and characters, and it's just so meticulously woven and engaging. What, sir? What? Did you hear someone bark? I'm so sorry about the dogs. Oh my gosh. So when they find this socialite hanging from the rafters of her suburban mansion in Chicago, Simon and Vicky's lives and story start to unravel. I guess that's all I'll say. I really it's hard to say anything at all without saying everything about this. And I want to tell you what's really going on, but I absolutely don't want to spoil anything about this for you because I wanted to take you for the ride that it took me on. Oh, Simon also does this really cute thing where when he gets worked up and he gets angry or excited or nervous about something, he thinks about grammar in his head, and I love that. Where words come from and why in the English language some words are pronounced a certain way and not another way, or how it should be spelled. He just constantly thinks about those things to kind of get himself to calm down. I just felt like the character work on top of the plot was just so good. It had plot and character. 5 out of 5 stars. I recommend it. Read this book if you like thrillers. You're gonna like it. If you haven't read it, you're gonna like it. It's twisty as hell. I don't see anyone rating this poorly. I just don't. It's solid. It's absolutely 100% solid. 5 stars. And that's it. Those are the 9 books that I read in the month of March. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you watched this video all the way through, what should we have you put? Why don't we do just a blue heart to match the cover? If you watched this video to the end, let me know what your favorite books were in the month of March. I'd love to know. If you have any recommendations that are similar to these, please let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget that life is short, so read Riley. Cheers and goodbye.